Cleveland might be building something nobody saw coming. While the spotlight is on rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders, a different storyline is unfolding behind the scenes. Jeudy is grinding in offseason drills, the offensive line is being rebuilt, and suddenly, the Cleveland Browns look very different heading into 2026. Something interesting started circulating among fans of the Cleveland Browns recently. It wasn't a press conference, a trade announcement, or even a major headline. It was a simple offseason workout clip. But the player in that clip, Jeudy, looked like someone who clearly understood that the upcoming season might define his future in Cleveland. The video showed Jeudy going through intense speed drills, sharp route cuts, and quick acceleration work. Nothing flashy, just repetition, discipline, and focus. But for Browns fans, the message behind those drills felt obvious: the pressure is real. And honestly, it should be. Jeudy entered the league with enormous expectations after being drafted by the Denver Broncos. His route-running ability was considered elite, and many believed he had the tools to become a true #1 receiver. Yet his career has been filled with moments of brilliance mixed with stretches of inconsistency. Big plays one week, quiet performances the next. Add in a few costly drops over the years, and suddenly the conversation around him began to change. Now in Cleveland, the situation is even more complicated. Reports and draft rumors have been circulating that the Browns may target a true WR1 in the upcoming draft. One name that continues to pop up in those discussions is Carnell Tate, the highly talented wide receiver from Ohio State Buckeyes football. Some analysts believe Cleveland could use an early pick to secure a dominant outside threat, someone who can instantly become the focal point of the offense. If that happens, the entire receiver hierarchy changes overnight. Instead of being expected to carry the passing game, Jeudy could slide into a WR2 role. For some players, that would be a disappointment, but for others, it can actually unlock their strengths. A second option often faces lighter coverage, fewer double teams, and more opportunities to exploit mismatches. Still, none of that is guaranteed. Right now, Jeudy appears to be approaching this offseason with a very clear mindset: prove the doubters wrong before the front office replaces you. That urgency is exactly what fans want to see. No complaints, no excuses, just work. And in the NFL, that kind of approach can change everything. Because if Jeudy sharpens his timing, improves his consistency, and builds chemistry with rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders, the Browns' offense suddenly becomes much more dangerous than people expect. But even if the receivers improve, one major problem from last season still looms over Cleveland. Because none of this matters if the quarterback doesn't have time to throw. And that's where the Browns' biggest offseason strategy begins to reveal itself. Before the Cleveland Browns could even think about improving their offense, they had to confront an uncomfortable reality. The biggest problem from last season wasn't the receivers, the play calling, or even the quarterback situation. It was the offensive line, and by the end of the year, that issue had become impossible to ignore. Week after week, the pocket collapsed far too quickly. Quarterbacks were forced to scramble, rush throws, or take hits that stalled drives before they could even develop. For fans watching at home, the pattern became painfully familiar. A promising play starts, the snap comes, and within seconds the protection breaks down. Suddenly the entire offense looks disorganized. Analysts across multiple NFL shows pointed out the same thing: Cleveland's protection simply wasn't holding up. Even talented quarterbacks struggle when defenders are constantly in the backfield. It doesn't matter how good your receivers are or how creative your playbook becomes. If the offensive line loses the battle in the trenches, the entire offense suffers. That's exactly what happened to Cleveland. Drives stalled, timing routes were disrupted, deep passes rarely had time to develop. The result was an offense that often looked far less dangerous than it should have been on paper. Fans grew frustrated and commentators began openly questioning the construction of the roster. But here's the interesting part. Instead of ignoring the criticism, the Browns' front office appeared to take it seriously. Throughout the offseason, Cleveland began focusing heavily on fixing the trenches. Rather than chasing flashy skill position signings, they prioritized the less glamorous but critical foundation of football: offensive line depth, versatility, and protection. It was a noticeable shift in philosophy. Some insiders even described the strategy as a complete reset. Build the protection first, give the quarterback time, then allow the rest of the offense to function the way it's supposed to. And if you're a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, that kind of commitment from the organization sends a powerful message. It tells you the team understands what went wrong and they're actively trying to fix it before the next season begins. Of course, rebuilding an offensive line isn't something that happens overnight. Chemistry between linemen takes time. Communication must be precise. Every player needs to understand not just their own assignment, but how it connects with the entire protection scheme. But the Browns' early moves suggest they are determined to change the narrative. Because if Cleveland truly wants its offense to evolve, the transformation has to start in the trenches. And that's exactly why the next move the Browns made started turning heads across the league. That's when the real shift in Cleveland's offseason strategy became impossible to ignore. The Cleveland Browns didn't just talk about fixing their protection problems, they actually started making aggressive moves to rebuild the offensive line from the ground up. One of the most talked about additions was veteran lineman Elgton Jenkins, formerly of the Green Bay Packers. The Browns brought him in on a deal that included significant guaranteed money, which immediately signaled something important. This wasn't a depth move, this was a statement. When a team commits real money to a lineman, it usually means they expect him to play a major role right away. And Jenkins brings exactly the type of versatility Cleveland desperately needed. Over the course of his career, he has played multiple positions across the offensive line, guard, center, and even tackle when necessary. That kind of flexibility is incredibly valuable in today's NFL, where injuries and matchup adjustments can force constant changes. For Cleveland, it means options. Depending on how the rest of the line shapes up, Jenkins could anchor the interior as a guard, slide over to center if needed, or help stabilize protection in multiple ways. And for a team that struggled with consistency in the trenches last season, that flexibility could become a huge advantage. But Jenkins wasn't the only move. Reports suggest the Browns are stacking depth across the offensive line, bringing in multiple players capable of competing for starting roles. Some analysts believe Cleveland could end up with as many as 5 different starters compared to last season's lineup. That's not a small adjustment. That's a complete rebuild. The strategy appears simple: create competition, build depth, and allow the best 5 linemen to earn their spots before the season begins. In theory, that approach raises the overall level of play while also protecting the team against injuries, something that has plagued offensive lines across the league. And perhaps most importantly, it gives the Browns a real chance to fix the biggest weakness that held their offense back. Because when a quarterback actually has time in the pocket, everything changes. Receivers can finish their routes, play action becomes more dangerous, running lanes open up. Suddenly, the entire offense starts functioning the way it was designed. For a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, that protection could make the difference between surviving a rookie season and thriving in it. But the Browns' offensive line overhaul may also hint at something much bigger happening behind the scenes. Because some insiders believe these moves aren't just about improvement. They might also be preparation for the end of a legendary era in Cleveland. But as the Cleveland Browns continue stacking offensive linemen this offseason, some insiders believe there may be another reason behind the sudden urgency. And it centers around one name that has been synonymous with Cleveland's offensive line for years: Joel Bitonio. Bitonio has quietly been one of the most reliable players the Browns have had over the past decade. A multiple-time Pro Bowler, a leader in the locker room, and one of the few constants during Cleveland's many ups and downs. When the Browns needed stability on the offensive line, Bitonio was almost always the one delivering it. But recently, there's been an unusual amount of silence surrounding his future. No major statements, no firm commitment about the upcoming season, just speculation, and that silence has started to raise eyebrows among analysts who follow the team closely. Some reporters have even compared the situation to what happened when legendary tackle Joe Thomas was nearing the end of his career. Back then, there were weeks of uncertainty before the official announcement came. The team remained quiet, insiders hinted at possible changes, and then eventually the news broke that one of Cleveland's most iconic players was stepping away from the game. Now, some observers feel a similar pattern could be unfolding again. To be clear, nothing has been confirmed, No official retirement announcement has been made, but the Browns' aggressive push to add interior offensive linemen has definitely fueled the conversation. Teams usually don't stack this much depth unless they're preparing for a potential transition. And if Bitonio were to step away, it would mark the end of an era in Cleveland. His presence has been a huge part of the Browns' offensive identity for years, not just because of his skill, but because of the leadership he brings to the locker room. Younger players often rely on veterans like Bitonio to set the tone, especially when it comes to preparation, discipline, and understanding the complexities of the offensive line. Replacing that kind of influence isn't easy. That's why Cleveland's offseason moves could be serving two purposes at once. On one hand, they're clearly trying to improve protection after last season's struggles. But on the other hand, they might also be preparing the next generation of linemen to step into leadership roles if a major veteran decides to walk away. And if that transition does happen, it could reshape the entire dynamic of the Browns' offense. Because while the offensive line protects the quarterback physically, its veteran leaders often protect the culture of the team as well. Which brings us back to the young quarterback at the center of all this change, Shedeur Sanders. Because the decisions Cleveland makes right now could directly shape how his entire NFL journey begins. Now here, where the bigger picture starts to come into focus. The moves the Cleveland Browns are making this offseason aren't random. When you step back and look at the pattern, it starts to look like a clear strategy. Build the offense in a way that gives Shedeur Sanders the best possible chance to succeed. For a young quarterback entering the league, situation matters almost as much as talent. Many rookies struggle not because they lack ability, but because the roster around them isn't stable enough to support their development. Poor protection, inconsistent receivers, and a struggling run game can derail even the most promising prospects. Cleveland appears determined not to let that happen. The first step, as we've already seen, is the offensive line rebuild. By investing in versatile linemen and stacking depth across the trenches, the Browns are trying to ensure Sanders actually has time in the pocket. Time to read defenses, time to let routes develop, time to make the kinds of throws that define great quarterbacks. But protection alone isn't enough. The Browns also know they need reliable weapons around him. That's where the wide receiver conversation becomes important. While Jeudy is still expected to play a major role in the offense, many analysts believe Cleveland may pursue a true #1 receiver in the draft. One name frequently mentioned in those discussions is Carnell Tate from the Ohio State Buckeyes football. If Cleveland were to add a player like Tate, the entire structure of the passing game could change. Defenses would be forced to respect a dominant outside threat, which could open up opportunities for Jeudy, tight ends, and slot receivers across the middle of the field. Then there's the running game. Reports suggest the Browns expect running back Quinshon Judkins to remain a key part of the offensive identity. A strong rushing attack doesn't just move the chains, it also makes life easier for a quarterback by forcing defenses to respect play action and hesitate before sending aggressive blitzes. Put all of that together and the vision becomes clear. A rebuilt offensive line, a balanced running attack, a receiving group with both speed and depth. Suddenly, Sanders wouldn't be stepping into chaos, he'd be stepping into an offense designed to help him grow. And that kind of environment can completely change the trajectory of a young quarterback's career. Of course, none of this guarantees success. The NFL is unpredictable. And even well-built teams can struggle when the season begins. But for the first time in a while, Cleveland's offseason moves suggest something different. Instead of reacting to problems after they appear, the Browns are trying to prevent them before they happen. But another storyline surrounding Sanders has also started catching attention across the league, and it involves one of the NFL's most feared defensive players. But while the Cleveland Browns are busy rebuilding their offense, another storyline surrounding Shedeur Sanders has quietly started gaining attention across the league. And surprisingly, it involves one of the NFL's most feared pass rushers, Max Crosby. Crosby, the star defensive end for the Las Vegas Raiders, has developed a noticeable level of respect for Sanders over the past few years. The two have crossed paths multiple times, and their interactions have been competitive but friendly, something fans quickly picked up on during game clips and interviews that started circulating online. In one particularly popular moment, cameras caught Crosby and Sanders exchanging words on the field during a game. At first glance, it looked like the typical NFL trash talk you see between opponents. But when the clip continued, it became clear the tone was different. Both players were smiling, laughing, and clearly enjoying the competition. After the game, Crosby even spoke publicly about Sanders' poise and confidence under pressure. For a young quarterback, that kind of respect from an elite defender says a lot. Crosby is known for being relentless on the field. Quarterbacks around the league know that if he's coming off the edge, they're going to feel the pressure all game long. Yet when asked about Sanders, Crosby didn't sound like someone dismissing a rookie. Instead, he talked about Sanders' composure in big moments and his ability to stay calm even when the pocket collapses. That kind of praise doesn't come easily in the NFL. Of course, fans quickly started running with the storyline. Social media discussions exploded with speculation, jokes, and wild theories. Some fans even began imagining what it would look like if Crosby ever ended up on the same team as Cleveland's defensive superstar Myles Garrett. To be clear, there's no confirmed report suggesting that move is actually happening. NFL contracts, salary caps, and roster construction make deals like that extremely complicated. But the mere idea of Crosby and Garrett rushing quarterbacks together is enough to spark excitement among football fans. Because if that ever happened, opposing offenses would have a nightmare scenario on their hands. Still, the real significance of this connection isn't about trades or rumors, it's about respect. When established veterans recognize a young player's ability early in his career, it often signals that the league is paying attention. And in Sanders' case, that recognition is starting to grow. But as intriguing as the Crosby connection might be, the bigger question remains whether Cleveland's offseason strategy will actually translate into wins when the season begins. Here, where the conversation around the Cleveland Browns starts to get interesting. For years, Cleveland has carried a reputation across the league for making questionable decisions, struggling with consistency, and falling short of expectations. Fans even coined the phrase "doing Browns things" whenever something went wrong. But this offseason, the tone feels different. Instead of chasing flashy headlines or overpaying for skill players, Cleveland's front office appears to be focusing on something far more fundamental: building a balanced, sustainable roster. And that's why some analysts quietly believe the Browns could become one of the league's most unexpected teams in the upcoming season. The biggest reason: the trenches. By aggressively rebuilding the offensive line, Cleveland is addressing the exact weakness that held the offense back last year. A stronger line doesn't just protect the quarterback, it improves every aspect of the offense. Running backs find wider lanes, play action becomes more effective, and receivers get the extra seconds they need to finish their routes. That protection could be especially important for rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders. Young quarterbacks often struggle when they're forced to play hero football behind a collapsing pocket. But if the Browns' offensive line improvements actually hold up, Sanders could enter a situation that's far more stable than many rookies experience. Then there's the potential improvement at wide receiver. Jeudy is clearly working to elevate his game this offseason, and rumors continue to swirl that Cleveland may draft a top receiver like Carnell Tate. If that happens, the Browns could suddenly have a receiving group capable of stretching defenses in multiple directions. And while the offense works through its transition, Cleveland's defense remains one of the most respected units in the league. Led by dominant pass rusher Myles Garrett and elite cornerback Denzel Ward, the Browns' defense already has the talent to keep games competitive. When a team combines a strong defense with an improving offense, that's when things can get interesting. That's exactly why some observers are starting to label Cleveland a potential sleeper team. Not a guaranteed contender, not a team expected to dominate the conference, but a team that could surprise people if the offseason plan actually works the way the front office hopes it will. Of course, the NFL has a way of humbling teams quickly. Injuries, chemistry issues, and unexpected setbacks can derail even the best offseason plans. But if Cleveland's strategy comes together, improved protection, emerging weapons, and steady quarterback development, the Browns might finally be building something fans haven't seen in years. A team that's not just reacting to problems, but one that's actually planning ahead. The future of the Cleveland Browns may ultimately come down to how quickly Shedeur Sanders develops in his new environment. Cleveland appears focused on fixing the issues that hurt them last season, particularly by strengthening the offensive line and creating better protection for their young quarterback. If players like Jeudy step up and the offense finds consistency, the Browns could become a much more competitive team. With defensive leaders like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward still anchoring the defense, Cleveland may finally have the balance needed to surprise people and change the narrative surrounding the franchise.